feature presentation.
Welcome back to another Untitled streaming review. I am one of your hosts, Matt Rohrbeck, alongside he's allergic to tomatoes, but he is tomato meter approved, Eric Marchin.
Should it be scrolling review?
Yeah, or is this Eric Marchin? Who knows?
Or are you Matt Rohrbeck? Who can you trust?
Exactly. Today we are reviewing the first 2 episodes of Marvel Studios' Secret Invasion. Spoiler-free, completely spoiler-free. We're putting this out before the episodes air, and we're also reviewing the first 2 episodes, where I believe everyone's only getting the first episode when this releases next week, which would be, I don't know the date. I should have
June 24th?
Prepped. Thanks, Eric. June
or is it 23rd?
I think they're still doing them on the Fridays, aren't they? Or are they doing them on the Wednesdays, which is the 21st? You know, guys, we should prep.
23rd. We should, but you're getting this raw. You're getting it real. It's in the moment. We're living in it.
If anything, Eric, we're raw and real. So,
raw and real.
That's the Untitled Movie
Podcast slogan.
Oh, gosh. How are you doing?
I'm good, Matt. I'm good. We've been recording a lot recently, so we have reviews for The Flash coming up, but also Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, Transformers, Rise of the Beasts, a review for Asteroid City. And it's been a lot of fun just kind of getting back into a groove, but also I think having more fun with it and just having a good time talking. I mean, I always have a good time talking about movies with you and things like that. But it's just nice to kind of do it at your own pace and not worry about anything else. And the world is a strange, paranoid-esque thriller like this show. So why not escape from the world and into the MCU with a show that's trying to be more grounded in reality?
Yeah. With false flags and conspiracy theories and
a Scrolodex,
terrible politicians,
Shooter McGavin.
Shooter McGavin. We're back in the MCU. We missed, for the first time probably in a long time, a review of an MCU movie with Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. I haven't, talked about my opinion on that movie. Maybe I'll do that on whenever we get to a main show. But I really liked Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. MCU in an interesting spot, and something we've talked about a lot, going through some growing pains after Endgame, at its worst, it's not great. At its best, it's been pretty good, but I don't think anything is blown my socks off probably since Endgame. We've had some really good stuff. I mean, I guess No Way Home with Spider-Man was, but then now you've seen Spider-Verse, and now I'm second guessing it. I'm like, I still really like that movie, but
WandaVision, and I think
there's been some really good stuff.
Loki has some good stuff in there.
Some really good stuff. I mean, that's what I mean by like peaks and valleys. It's been kind of all over the place. But I think Guardians is great. I think I really liked Black Panther, and there's been some good shows. I like Miss Marvel. I like She-Hulk, but I don't know if anything. I'm like, fuck, this is incredible. So I was really excited for Secret Invasion because it feels like going back to those kind of Winter Soldier vibes, that political espionage, like spy thriller, a little bit more grounded, even though it still has that kind of fantastical superhero, kind of element to it with obviously shape-shifting aliens and stuff like that. But, something sort of different, a little barely any superheroes in this. You get War Machine without, him even being in the suit. You get Nick Fury, who's always been kind of, a big part, obviously, probably one of the biggest parts of the MCU, but having a focus on him, I think, is really interesting. And then having some other players come back from various franchises and different things. And in the comics, Secret Invasion is this big deal, this big crossover event, right? On the level of a, Civil War, Infinity War, and things like that in the comics that were these big crossover events. So this is, I think, one of the bigger deals when it comes to the MCU on Disney Plus, the shows. So I was looking forward to this. I mean, I guess I'll just kick it off completely spoiler free. After seeing 2 episodes, I'm definitely intrigued to see where this is going. I think it's only 6 episodes, so we only have, like, 4 more after this. I always forget with the Marvel shows that they're just, like, one big, long movie that it's not, like, 12 episodes or 8 episodes sometimes, but unless it's the 30-minute ones, which are sometimes 10 episodes. Anyways, I'm intrigued, but I'm not completely won over yet. I think the pacing was um a lot happens, but also it's methodical in its pacing, where I feel like it's taking its time to really kind of, show its cards and kind of move along. So um, I feel like both a lot happened and nothing happened in these 2 episodes, and I'm not completely won over yet. I think there's some good stuff here. I really love Olivia Colman. Not enough of her, I think, in the 2 episodes, but I do like when she pops in. She's, a great actress, um and there's a lot of great actors and actresses in this show, and I think Kingsley Ben-Adir is an interesting villain so far, and they are taking that approach of where you don't necessarily agree with what's happening in the show, but it is one of those villains where you can kind of understand where they're coming from. Although the plot of the show and what the rebels are doing, and we're trying to dance around stuff so we don't spoil things, but feels a little derivative of stuff we've seen a bunch of times, not only in the MCU but in other kind of movies like this and shows like this. But I do like him. I think he has a presence to him, and I kind of liked him so far. And then focusing on Nick Fury, it's just like I think what's carrying the show is I just love Samuel L. Jackson so much. So like when you focus on him and just I could watch him, talk with anyone. And there's a great sequence with him and Rhodey, with Fury and Rhodey, where a back and forth between them that I really like. I don't necessarily 100% buy Rhodey motivation or who he's aligned with and stuff like that, where I'm kind of getting lost in like, why would these characters be acting this way towards one another? But throughout the series, you see that a lot of people are kind of pissed at Nick Fury for leaving for years and just disappearing. So people have kind of turned on him. But yeah, here's the thing, like I'm not a huge fan of Captain Marvel. Um, the movie. It's okay, but it's fine, but it's lower on my MCU ranking if I was to show those again. The Skrulls never really did anything for me. And I just there's some cool ways that they utilize the who can you trust, like they can shapeshift into anyone, especially at the end of episode 1. I think there's a cool sequence where I finally like, okay, this is working how you're showing this. It's sort of creepy and cool in the way that you're doing it, but just the like, is this person this person? Is this person this person? Like kind of wears thin a little bit to me, or it gets like confusing where you're like, okay, wait, were they that person the whole time, or were they that person just for like that sequence or moment? And like I had myself going like that, which I know the show is intentionally trying to get you to second guess everything. So that's where the intrigue comes in, where after the 2 episodes I'm definitely like, I am interested in seeing where this is going, but from everything from the action to the plot, I just was like, okay, I feel like I've seen this done better in other things. So I wasn't like totally blown away by it. And I'm not like with these MCU shows or just TV in general, by the end of the episode, I want you to leave me in a spot where I'm like, I can't wait for next week. And I don't know if I'm at that spot right now. That's
It's
where I'm
more
at.
of an obligation at this point, isn't it? It feels like that. Where
Which is
like,
unfortunate, but, like, I
yeah,
definitely like, even when it starts, like, again, I've talked about this a lot, and I'll let you go in a sec, Eric, but
yeah, no
I'm, like, the
worries.
huge MCU guy, which is fading a little bit. I've always said I'm in that kind of, Age of Ultron era where I'm like, I'm still like this, where I'm like and, I still like it, but I don't know if I'm like, "Fucking new MCU movie or show," right? Like, even the way the Marvel Studios fanfare, is utilized in this, like, it's probably intentional, but like it's very quick and it's just like it. I don't know. The vibes have just been off, and even in these first 2 episodes, I just was like, the vibes are a little off. Like I'm seeing a lot of characters that I've seen in movies before. Nick Fury's been there since the literal beginning. Um, Having Maria Hill as a part of it, and Everett Ross, and having
With an
Ro
ascot.
and lot of ascot talk in the superhero content we'll be reviewing over the next couple of days. But having, people like Rhodey, who's been there pretty much from the beginning with an actor change, but Don Cheadle's almost been there since the beginning. So like, and even Emilia Clarke I like a lot, but like there's just, and I mean, you and I, Eric, we're actually probably two of the biggest fans of Iron Man 3, which I think does that political espionage thing. I know I've seen the entirety of Iron Man 3 when I've only seen, 1/3 of this show. But, the president of the United States, played by Dermot Mulroney in this, is going to be a part of this show. And then there's the president in Iron Man 3, and there's that whole Air Force One sequence. And I liked the kind of political espionage kind of vibe of that movie. And I'm just like, I know this is trying to invoke Winter Soldier, I think, right? Out of anything. And it's missing something. And I think that thing is Captain America or Black Widow. And I like Nick Fury, but I just don't know if it's enough to carry it. But I am intrigued, and I hope it wins me over the next 4 episodes. So.
Yeah, I'll start off with what I wrote for the Rotten Tomatoes quote, but I'll get into it in more detail. A sluggish start to Marvel's paranoid sci-fi thriller falls flat when grounding the geopolitical material in spycraft minutia. And usually I like that kind of deliberately paced sort of setup to, anything that is dealing with espionage or, tradecraft in general. But within the MCU, and I think this is why I'm kind of mixed on the sort of the spy stuff within the MCU in general, is because it's so fanciful and over the top at this point that it's like, well, having a conspiracy theory be kind of like at the center of the story, it's like, oh, well, yeah, well, I could see some validity there, because I mean, look at how weird the world has become over this period of time. And you're watching this and you're thinking to yourself, okay, yeah, I like Samuel L. Jackson as a movie star, and Nick Fury works as a supporting player. But there's not much there. And so with this show, what they're also trying to do is they're giving him more character development. You're getting the new old Nick Fury. And I think part of that story, while fascinating as an allegory, the blip itself now is almost working in a way where it's kind of feels like a reference to the pandemic.
Yeah.
Where, this version of Nick Fury, after coming back from the blip, is dealing with, deception and displacement, racism, anger, resentment, paranoia, uncertainty. And within all of that, like the Nick Fury before the blip versus the Nick Fury now, might be a little bit more out of touch. And, I think that that's an interesting place to start. But at the same time, it's like, do we really need all this, internalized sort of character development within someone who's more of kind of a conduit to bringing these other bigger characters together? And even mentioning the Avengers within the context of Secret Invasion, it kind of feels like it takes you out of the show a little bit, where it's like, okay, yeah, why wouldn't the Avengers be dealing with this? Because it's such a big deal that it's like, this isn't something like Winter Soldier, where it does kind of feel more like an internal investigation or something that is just like
into Shield and with Hydra infiltrating Shield. This is like, oh, they're trying to kill everyone on the planet.
Yes.
Like, it's just like, and then
this is a nuclear war, basically.
And then you get the line of like, why don't you call your friends, which they've done in other MCU movies, because I feel like there are people in the writers' room or the writers working on the movie go, well, we kind of have to have the characters say that, because it would be absurd if someone didn't ask why they wouldn't bring those people in. And it's getting more and more like the suspension of disbelief of why they wouldn't call the Avengers or someone more powerful gets sillier and sillier, right? Like, of just Nick Fury going like, I need to do this, it's personal. It's like, even Rhodey,
and this time,
like, I'm
it's
just
personal.
Like, I feel like Rhodey'd be like, I know it's supposed to be like no one believes him that this is actually happening and all this kind of stuff, and that's part of it. But like, I never even bought people turning on Fury as much as they did either. But continue.
Yeah, and that's one of the biggest
Are you
problems
still?
because
Oh,
we're at this point where the world, the MCU, the world within the MCU Earth has changed so much that I think you can start to believe that, yeah, there would be these weird sort of, subgroups and races and alien nations kind of all colliding. It's not as a hard pill to swallow compared to, the paranoid thrillers that it's emulating. Even something like Invasion of the Body Snatchers, where you have the idea of the parable of being like a Cold War sort of scenario where the people among you could be, actually a sleeper cell or an agent of chaos, kind of, infiltrating the American way and, subverting it to create something horrible or destroy it and turn it into something else. And so when you're watching this, you already know that the Skrull Nation, is kind of a combination of both refugees looking for a place to call home, but then you have a subsection of them wanting to, take back what is theirs or what they feel is owed to them, based on, Nick Fury's promises. And so that in itself, I think, is interesting, but it just kind of gets lost in the traditional kind of cliches of, okay, well, we have to have an interrogation scene, okay, we have to have, a big shootout, we have to have this kind of great kind of action set piece to keep people interested in terms of the build up. And the best sequence in these first two episodes is just simply a conversation between Don Cheadle and Samuel L. Jackson.
Yeah.
And specifically, I think Don Cheadle is great in that second episode. And he's always been an excellent actor, but I weirdly felt like watching this one scene between him and Jackson and their characters, and sort of having a conversation about race and sort of, the idea of being supportive of one another and trying to move forward, and all of that is excellent. But Cheadle does something there where it feels like it's not just simply, an actor collecting a paycheck. Like
Mhm.
there's a truly, like, I'm really pissed off with, this guy who, thinks he knows everything and is saying everything. And it's like, well, he's been gone for a period of time. Let's, regroup and understand where we are now. And I think the blip also gives a little bit of validity to Cheadle, actually, to where he is now as a character, as
Yeah.
where Rhodey is, because he's kind of tied by bureaucracy. He's at a different point to where maybe he was even in Endgame or Civil War. And so he's kind of having to maneuver both the superhero life and also the political aspect of his life. And I really like that kind of sort of interaction between the two. And even like Jackson, again, I don't know if Jackson's a great actor, but he is obviously a movie star. And
Charismatic, I think, which is why.
sure, sure. But you look at him as an actor, and there is one moment within that conversation when it ends where, like, you think I'm even when I'm out, I'm in. Like, that's a really well delivered line. But it just kind of feels, again, like Nick Fury is just one of those characters that's more of an audience surrogate, in a way to kind of introduce you to a new Avenger or set things up in order to kind of move the bigger picture along. And so when you're giving him more to do that's more focused on him, it does kind of feel like he is kind of thinly developed. And then, yeah, I really do like Kingsley Ben-Adir as well. But a lot of this plot does, and again, like, they both characters have scenes that are very similar, where they're sitting at round tables, kind of being on
Yeah.
the opposing ends. But you look at how someone at certain, again, age is another thing that's really important to this, where how people handle things depending on where they are politically or personally. And, in both cases, you have these characters not using excessive force, but their wits. And I think that that's an interesting aspect of it as well. But it just never really comes together with the actual sort of genre elements within the spy world. I think a lot of that is kind of, um, you know, uh, run of the mill for the most part. Like, there's not a lot there that's really all that intriguing because you kind of already know the world so well, and they're not really surprising you with anything.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with that, and I think it's hard to like do a. These aren't technically reviews. I guess they're like first impressions because the way that the Marvel shows are structured, they aren't really like episodes of TV, right? Like it does feel like you're seeing a chunk of a movie. So it's
Yeah.
like if we reviewed the first act of a film, and I know we've joked about Dune and Spider-Verse and we're getting Mission Impossible and stuff of being a part one, but this would be like seeing the first part of a trilogy or something, right? We've only seen the first act. So which I think is fair to talk about and say like if we're intrigued to watch the rest, but it is so hard because they are structured like movies. I think only like She-Hulk was, because they had that episodic format kind of
And
thing where
WandaVision, because
WandaVision because of
WandaVision
the
was playing within the
sitcom-y.
structure. Yeah.
Yeah, where they felt like episodes of TV where I would never look at the first act of a movie and because a movie sometimes doesn't find its groove until the second act or even the third act sometimes where everything kind of comes together. So it is difficult, but like there are some things I did really like. We mentioned some of the performances. I love seeing Shooter McGavin pop up. Great. Just more Christopher
Christopher
McDonald.
McDonald.
More Christopher McDonald, please. And finally Christopher McDonald is in the MCU.
At
I
last.
I did like, again, even if some of the things are derivative of other spy movies and shows and things like that, like I did like the sequence at the end of the first episode, even though it feels like, something we've seen a million times before, but I liked how that set up. There was a very surprising thing that happened at the end of episode 1, which then made me a little bit more intrigued to watch 2. And then the end of episode 2, there's a equally surprising thing that's very different than the end of
But almost
episode 1.
laughably bad, I think, a
I don't
little
know if
bit.
it's I didn't quite I understand what you're saying, but like it
It's
was
just
a
a
weird
weird choice
thing
to
to
where
end
they
on.
leave it. Yeah.
Um and yeah, I what I was surprised, darker and more violent than I was anticipating. And I mean like in the way that the MCU would usually cut away from violence or kind of imply violence. This more bullet holes going through someone, fingers getting chopped off, knives going through people's necks and shit like that, like where I'm like, oh goddamn, like that's way more violent than I expected. It's not like Deadpool or I don't know, any other R-rated spy thriller or something like that, like with gratuitous gore, but um it was more violent and darker than I expected. It was even some of the stuff that the rebel Skrulls get up to, and their plan and how that's executed, and the casualties and stuff like that were um way more explicit than I'm used to in the MCU, and I guess that's them trying to take a grounded adult kind of approach to this series. And I don't think that's a good or a bad thing. I just wanted to state that because I was surprised. There's a couple action sequences or a moment with Olivia Colman's character where I'm like, oh fuck, I did not expect them to show that. And I just wanted to point that out, but not that that's a good or bad thing because I think it worked fine implying violence before, and I'm fine with showing it. It's interesting what as they evolve and get further along in the MCU, you see them trying to open up to things that I don't think they would have done 10 years ago or 7 years ago or something like that. And because of the Disney Plus format and things like that, where they don't have to worry about an R rating in a movie theater or something like that, that I think they're open to doing something a little bit darker, I guess.
Yeah, I don't disagree with them going kind of the more explicit route for something like this, and with the context of the storytelling. But there is something that is a little weird with the bigger picture of it, where tonally it does kind of feel off, where you will get, this hyper stylized, very colorful, cosmic kind of section within the MCU that isn't very violent, that is geared towards all ages. But then you get something like this, and they both seemingly fit within the same world, and it kind of feels off there when you're looking at it as a bigger picture. But when you're focused on it as just, one piece, I think that's fine. I just think when you're looking at it as a whole, it is odd when you see, blood or dismemberments of any kind, and then you see something that's kind of more light and fluffy, where I think the bridge, the strongest kind of connection between those two is something that James Gunn has done with the Guardians movies, where there is that sense of glee, but the glee is almost demonic in some cases, and you have,
Even Guardians
those.
3 has some gore in it that I was surprised by too,
Yeah,
right?
and that's also coming from Gunn's background with
Yeah.
trauma, right? So you have those elements, or mentioning with Iron Man 3, Shane Black's personality coming out in the material and kind of subverting your expectations for what a superhero movie could be. This feels a little bit more streamlined with the spy genre as a whole, but when you're watching it, I think some of the grounded elements are harder to keep on the ground, because the world as a whole is so unpredictable within supernatural, cosmic, of other worlds, races. There's just so much going on that I think if you kind of hone in on something specifically, it might be harder to dive into for those first two episodes, where you're kind of still adjusting to, okay, well, this isn't really going to do anything that's too fantastic or over the top, and it's kind of
Yeah.
playing closer to something like The Americans than it is
The Americans with aliens, yeah.
the Americans with aliens, or Alien Nation, or something like
Yeah.
that. And even another show that I mentioned, even in my tweets, like it's a less campier version of something like V, which
What is V?
so V was a show in the early 80s that was about an alien race that came to Earth that was trying to cohabitate with the Earth population. And at first they were among us wearing human suits, and underneath they're lizards. And
Okay.
some of them are good, some of them are bad. But
Sounds like this.
yeah, and it's very dated. Like, I think a lot of people now will look back on that show, and the only thing maybe they'll remember is like Robert Englund was on the show for he was like a good lizard alien, and Robert Englund went
Sure.
on to play Freddy Krueger.
He's the Ben Mendelsohn of
Exactly. And so it reminded me of that a little bit, because I remember watching that show as a kid, because it was on Space in syndication. But it was campy from the sense of you're watching it as a child growing up in the late 90s, early 2000s, where I could see like this movie this show in 20 years also being kind of like that, where it's a little bit goofy overall, especially with the Skrull makeup and
Yeah,
some of the
that's kind of
customs and culture of it all.
that's what throws me off. I think sometimes when I go back to, like, I just don't know if I like the Skrulls as characters, and if I am really invested. Like, I will say it's interesting because in Captain Marvel they throw you off by making the Skrulls good guys, right? And that was kind of an interesting twist in Captain Marvel that you're not expecting, I guess. Because if you're a Marvel fan or a fan of the comics, you kind of know how the Skrulls have been portrayed. So portraying them as, refugees in that movie, and not bad people, or I guess they're not people, but bad. I guess they're people, bad people. It was interesting, but then you kind of go back on that right away because you want to do Secret Invasion, and then you have to go, well, how do we make the Secret Invasion plot work, now that we've kind of portrayed them as good guys? And I think it's interesting having a rebel group that's kind of sick of Talos's and Nick Fury's kind of like, oh, well, we're working on it, we'll find you a planet, and then they go, well, you're taking too fucking long, so we're gonna kind of go off, and we can shapeshift into anyone, and we'll try to kind of take over Earth. But then on a negative side, the whole thing, like, we're trying to kill everyone on Earth, has been a million, like, it's every superhero plot, right? Like,
Yeah.
so even though you're doing like a grounded spy thriller, and even if the way they are trying to destroy everyone on Earth is in like we're going to manipulate society and the government and nations to fight against each other, and all that shit, is still ultimately ticking, they're trying to kill everyone, they're trying to blow up Earth essentially, right? So then that's kind of where I go, okay, we're just like, there's a different wrapping paper on this, but once you rip the wrapping paper off, it's still kind of the same superhero plot we've seen, time and time again. Is it a little bit more interesting when you go, well, you don't have a superhero to handle it this time, you have just a dude and Nick Fury who has to do it himself? Then you go, okay, that's sort of interesting. Okay, he has to stop the planet from blowing up essentially. And I'm being that's not exactly the plot. I just don't want to spoil it for everyone, but that's essentially what the plot is. But there's more nuance, maybe isn't the best word, but there's more to it than what I'm making it out to be. I'm simplifying it. But then it goes back to our point before of being like, well, if it was like, hey, everyone might nuke each other and kill everyone, like, I feel like you would be like, all right, let's maybe call Thor or Captain Marvel and they can probably deal with this in 30 seconds. Like they'll just, I don't know. But I guess then there is a point being made, well, if we brought them down and they had to fight governments and stuff like that, it makes them look like the bad guys. And so like, I do like some elements. I'm just, if you can tell, I'm just a little bit all over the place with my like thoughts on it. Like one moment I'm like, hey, that's kind of cool. And then one moment I go, is it though? And then I go, or is that okay? And I'm like, I don't know. And then I don't want to be back and forth on like that. But again, maybe the show is intentionally doing that. I don't know. Maybe I'm giving it too much credit because it is supposed to be second guessing everything.
Are you a double agent, Matt?
Yeah, like that is what it's supposed to be doing. So, until I see the rest of it, it's hard to kind of say. And I don't know. I'm mixed positive, I guess. I still enjoyed the 2 episodes. I'm waiting for that MCU thing. Like Guardians really hit with me, but I think I saw it at the right time, the right mentality, I wanted to get back to the movies. The MCU is special to me because it's been a huge part of, uh, what I've enjoyed about going to the movies over the last 15 years. So Guardians hit with me, but I haven't had that, oh my God, this is awesome. But I guess like after you come to the sorry, I should continue that sentence. After you get to the
talking about Transformers again,
the point where Endgame was such this fantastic ending to this very long saga, where I feel like we all just have a little bit of a hangover from it for people who are huge fans, and then people who aren't huge fans, like I could see people just going, I don't know, do I need to watch every single show and see every movie? And I don't know if you do anymore, but like, I don't know if you didn't, like a lot of times, if you didn't see Guardians, you'll be fine to see this. Even if you didn't see Black Panther, like the Everett Ross stuff, you're not going to be lost. Like it's fine. So I don't know. I'm a bit all over the place and I'll leave it at that. I do want to, I'm not like, oh my God, next week can't get here fast enough. But I am intrigued to watch the rest.
Yeah, I think I'm at this point just more of a completist, where this show, I'll watch it because there will be some continuity that'll connect to the Marvels or, to the future of the MCU. And, I think
Armor Wars and things like that.
Yeah. And I think one thing as well that I'm not the biggest fan of with this show, which is really unfortunate, is I don't like the look of it. I think it's just very static looking and digital, and that televisual look that we
still doesn't
about.
look like the movies as much
No.
as they want them to. Like seeing Guardians Volume 3 recently, or Black Panther Wakanda Forever or something, and you're seeing all these characters that are taken from the movies, right? Like we mostly have seen Nick Fury and Maria Hill and Talos and Everett Ross and all these characters on a film, but you know what we mean by that. But like in a movie, when you see it here, there's still something that looks like TV, and that threw me off as well. So I completely agree with you there. Like,
yeah, it's just very cheap looking. Like it does look like the budget version of Marvel, where the movies are the movies, so they'll put some more money and effort into it. But the shows, because also scheduling and shooting is a different kind of beast when it comes to television. It does kind of feel lower tier, and it's unfortunate because like Loki and WandaVision do look good, and they have high production value, but this kind of feels flat cinematically, and you're just, again, it's televisual, and you're watching a everything's in focus, everything is crisp, and nothing is technically wrong with it. It's just kind of bland
I
and
always have to
something.
rewatch these on Disney Plus because of that
Yeah,
watermark we have.
I
It's
know.
just the
It's
worst.
it's a hard judge with that,
Yeah,
but there's something about the look overall that I think is almost a deterrent,
I
where
agree.
you're watching it and that almost makes it hard to get into, because it's not that it has to look pretty or anything, but I wish it kind of looked more like the type of show or movies that it was emulating, and it had
You almost
more
want it to be shot on
texture.
film. Yes, that's what I
Yeah,
mean. Like, I know they would never do that, especially for a Disney Plus show. But there are ways you could have maybe given it a little bit more texture. And I agree with you. Texture is the perfect word, right? Like,
yeah.
you want it to kind of have that feel to it that, like, but it's almost too crisp, and in a bad way, where the as cameras get better and clearer and 4K and stuff like that, you can sometimes tell when something's a set, or when something looks very flat, or it looks cheaper than it does in a movie or something like that. And mind you, there's very little VFX in this series, I would say, because it's trying to be a little bit more grounded, other than the scrolls kind of transforming.
And Samuel Jackson's
Um,
beard.
oh God, that was not great. Yeah, yeah,
I
his
mean, it's
beard
better
was
than his
not.
mustache and spiral from the
Yeah.
Book of Saw, but it is very, like, it is
It's
very
too
silly. I
perfect,
like
like,
the
it's
look of it, but I don't
yeah.
like, it doesn't look
It
real.
looks like a fake beard. It's
Yeah.
just like and I noticed that too, and that comes with some of this, like, super clear, like, if it was grainy and textured, then maybe you're not gonna pay attention to the fake beard as much, right? But, like, when it's so fucking crisp and you just see this perfectly glued on beard on Sam Jackson, and, you can tell, like, oh, he's going to shave next episode. When I think we've even seen it in the trailer when he puts the Nick Fury eye patch on, and he's back to classic Nick Fury or whatever. It's they
Classic
didn't
Nick.
they just were like, no, we'll put a fake beard on you. I'm like, has the technology, have we not gotten good enough beard technology or wig technology? It's just like, it always looks bad.
Well,
Like, it
I don't
just,
know, just let him grow facial hair.
yeah, it doesn't have to be like a big bushy beard. It just can be like an unkept, like, I think Sam Jackson can grow a beard, right? Like, I
Yeah.
don't know. But I guess just with how they shoot the show, probably that's why. But where you're not shooting it in chronological order, right? So those first two episodes when you have this beard, but it's this clearly glued on beard. It's just like, it's stuff like that that does throw you off and take you out of it a little bit. But maybe we're being a little nitpicky. We're not necessarily going to do weekly breakdowns or reviews of Secret Invasion, but once it's over, Eric and I might talk about it as a whole, maybe as some sort of spoiler cast, because I've enjoyed doing that with you, but no promises there. But I will be watching week to week. But even with this show, I wouldn't even be like, you could probably just wait till it's all out and binge it, like, as a movie, like, unless something, you know, crazy happens and you don't want to be spoiled. And I guess there are some things like
Well, in the
that,
first
but
episode, I
yeah.
think there is, but
So, I mean, if you're a big MCU person, you're going to watch it right away anyway. But it is one of those things where I'm like, I don't know if you need to, like, rush out, but if there is something that happens that you might be spoiled in that first episode. So you might want to jump on right away. But thank you all for listening or watching. We really do appreciate it. As Eric mentioned at the beginning of the episode, we have tons of new reviews out right now. We have reviews out for Transformers, Rise of the Beasts. We have reviews for, how am I so bad at this that I don't even remember what we've done?
Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse,
Yeah,
Fast 10.
yeah,
We have reviews coming up for Asteroid City, which you can look forward to. The Flash.
yeah.
We'll have a review of Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny coming up soon. So there's a
Yeah.
lot. We're back in a big way. Untitled Movie Podcast, keeping it raw and real.
You know it. You know it. As always, you can find more of my work around the internet, but mostly at untitledmoviepodcast.com. And you can follow me on all of those social medias at Matt Rohrbeck. Also, go check out our letterbox, which is untitled_movies.
And if you have some time as well, please write us a review or give us a rating. It always helps, and we really appreciate it. We love to hear any feedback that you guys have, and to know that you're out there still listening. So that's much appreciated as well. And you can find more of my reviews on rogerstv.com/cinemascene and on all the social medias at em6211.
Until next time.
Keep on scrolling, 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 scrolling.
What?